Welcome to the Real News Network in Baltimore. I'm Kim Brown. On January 20th, the day that Donald Trump was inaugurated as president, police arrested 230 protesters, including 7 journalists in Washington, D.C. Last Tuesday, a federal grand jury has indicted 217 of those protesters on felony rioting charges. If convicted, the accused could face a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison and up to $25,000 in fines. And joining us to talk about the indictments is Mark Goldstone. He is an attorney for some of the protesters who have been indicted and has had over 30 years of experience defending people charged during political protests. He has represented groups such as ACT UP, Greenpeace, Citizen Action, Occupy DC, and many more. He's joining us today from Washington, D.C. Mark, we appreciate you being here on The Real News.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mark, can you please tell us about the charges and how your clients are reacting to them?
So, as you mentioned, Kim, there's over 200 individuals who are charged in a multi-count indictment with either rioting or inciting to riot, which is a felony charge subject to up to 10 years in prison under the District of Columbia Code. And this is a very broad indictment that the grand jury has returned. And the clients are obviously very, very nervous and very upset about it. Because there were certain instances of property damage and certain instances of violence that did occur, but nowhere near 217 people were directly involved in those activities.
And how many of these who have been indicted are your clients?
I was initially assigned by the court to represent 44, and those numbers have diminished slightly over the last couple of weeks.
Now, Washington, D.C. Police, Metropolitan Police Department, for those outside of the D.C. area, really have a reputation for being generally even-handed. Now, this comes after being sued numerous times for over-policing for protests in the past. But just how unusual is it for people in a protest like this to be indicted under felony rioting charges?
So, Kim, as you said, I've been defending activists for more than 30 years in the District of Columbia and have represented thousands and thousands of people who come to exercise their freedom of speech in the nation's capital. And I have never seen or heard of a single felony indictment for riot or frankly, for anything. So this is extremely unusual and we believe very overbroad and very unprecedented.
Mark, do you think that it will go to trial, or are prosecutors angling to file the toughest charges possible in order to pressure the defendants to settle for less serious charges, as is so common nowadays?
It's not clear what the government's theory of liability is, other than it's a very broad theory, which basically says that anyone who is within a certain zone, a certain area in the District of Columbia, while acts of violence and while acts of property destruction were taking place, that those individuals, because they either wore black or dark colored clothing, they had ski masks or gas masks or goggles or helmets, the government is saying that anyone who was dressed in that fashion was doing so in order to conceal their identity, to prevent law enforcement from being able to identify them, and also was egging on or inciting those people who actually committed those acts of violence or property destruction. And therefore, this very broad government theory has put a very broad net around these 217 people, some of whom may have only been exercising constitutionally protected freedom of speech rights, and were not necessarily affiliated with the acts of criminality.
So according to one report, civil rights charges were filed against the D.C. Police Department, accusing the police of kettling, which is a practice where they surround protesters and arrest them indiscriminately. So what can you tell us about this civil rights case? Is it proceeding, to your knowledge?
Right. So basically, the day of the inauguration, there was a simultaneous filing of these 217 criminal charges against the demonstrators. And simultaneously with that, the demonstrators filed a class action civil rights lawsuit against the District of Columbia Police for just what you described, Kim, which was the practice of kettling, which means the surrounding by police of protesters without giving them an adequate opportunity to be warned that they needed to disperse any kind of dispersal order or opportunity to disperse. And we just today received a report from a DC police monitoring organization, a District of Columbia government monitoring agency, that pointed out some of the obvious problems with the District of Columbia policing during the inauguration. That report was sent to Mayor Muriel Bowser, and we are calling upon her to take action, follow the recommendations of the DC Complaint Review Board, which did the investigation. They had monitors on the scene, and they prepared a written report that's available on the internet for all to see, in which they criticized some of the actions of the police, including the accusation that you made that they were kettled, which means that they were not given warnings and proper opportunity to disperse.
So, Mark, you have defended protesters for a long time now. So what do you think the felony charges against these protesters mean for participation in protests in the future in Washington, D.C.? I mean, is the aim here to have a chilling effect on participating?
It clearly has a chilling effect because people are facing much more serious charges than they anticipated. Number one, more people are facing charges than were anticipated. And 1 month into the cases, the government has only dismissed about 9 of the more than 200 and something cases. They dismissed cases against journalists. They dismissed cases against law students and legal observers. But in our view, there's a lot more cases that likewise deserve to be dismissed without charge. And it's our position that the government has had over a month to study the videos, take statements, review the photographs, and so forth. And at this point, they should be ready to dismiss many, many, many additional charges. And so far, the government has not taken that step, which we believe is required under not just the law of the First Amendment, the broad federal law. Also, there's a DC specific law called the First Amendment Assemblies Act of 2004, and that law very clearly spells out the requirements for police to have individualized probable cause against individuals before they're placed under arrest, along with the orders to disperse and the opportunity to allow people to disperse if they're not directly implicated in criminality.
So, Mark, what's next for your clients, absent of what you just sort of described, whether or not the prosecutor will decide to continue to drop charges against protesters who have been indicted? When is the next court date scheduled? Like, what can we expect coming?
So, for example, tomorrow we have additional court dates for some of the defendants, and they'll be coming in and they'll be read the felony indictment, and they'll be setting a next court date called a status hearing date a couple weeks from now. And during that period of time, the defense will be undertaking a review of up to 600 hours of police videotapes that the government is making available in a special discovery online setup that they've arranged for us. And we'll be trading plea negotiations back and forth with the government. And we do hope to either get cases dismissed or favorable plea offers between now and the next status hearing. But as I said, it's our belief that these cases should have been dismissed. Many of these cases should have been dismissed a long time ago.
Indeed. Well, we have been joined with Mark Goldstone. He is an attorney in Washington, D.C. He's representing some of the protesters that were arrested on Inauguration Day back on January 20th. Last week, they were charged with felony counts of rioting. So this is a very serious case. We will keep an eye on this. And Mark, we hope to speak with you in the future to get an update as to what happens next.
Thank you again, Kim, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching the Real News Network.